Here's a quick disclaimer. The views, statements, and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers. The statements are not intended to be product claims or medical advice. Hi, Diana Freik here. I'm the host of the Gooder Podcast, where I get to talk with the powerhouse women in the food, beverage, and wellness categories about their journeys to success and their insights on the industry. This episode is brought to you by Retail Voodoo. Retail Voodoo is a brand development firm providing strategic brand and design services for companies in the food, wellness, and beverage industries. Our clients include Starbucks, Kind, REI, PepsiCo, Hikey, and many other market leaders. So, if your goal is to crush your competition by driving growth and disrupting the marketplace with new and innovative ideas, give us a call and let's talk. You can learn more at retail-voodoo.com. Well, today I'd like to introduce you all to Melissa Connor, who is partner and managing director of Jennifer Bett Communications. A little bit about Melissa. She's an award-winning communications strategist with over 15 years of industry experience. In July of 2014, Melissa joined Jennifer Bett Meyer at Jennifer Bett Communications as the agency's partner and managing director, working to establish the company as a leading agency for fast-growing, value-driven consumer brands that are defining the modern marketplace. Melissa holds a particular focus on DEI efforts, and most notably as it relates to scaling consumer-facing businesses in inclusive, sustainable ways to better service all backgrounds and identities. Over the years, Melissa has worked with iconic brands such as Tom's, Sotheby's Diamonds, and Jack Spade, among many others. And in 2017, Melissa was honored by the Public Relations Society of America, or PRSA, as a member of its inaugural 15 Under 35 Awards. I could go on. Literally, her bio is 45 pages. No, it's not that long, but she's got just accolades and she's very well known in the industry. And I'm just super excited to introduce Melissa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Diana. That was one of the nicest intros I've ever received. So you should be my publicist.
I'll think about that. Okay. Well, so great that we finally get to record this podcast. And remind me, you're on the East Coast. Are you in New York?
I am in Connecticut,
Out
in the suburbs, in the woods, which I love. We were a pandemic move, but I oversee our New York office and go into the city as often as I can. And I love it. It's actually really nice to kind of have the best of both worlds.
Well, I have many friends that have done that, and now they're starting to think, oh, I have to come into the city. Is that starting to get a little tricky for you?
For me, no. I mean, we chose where we live to make sure we still were pretty close to the city because my husband and I both have businesses with hubs in New York, and we still love the city. It's so great, but we have a family now and fresh air and that life. But the commute is super manageable. We're also really lucky because so many folks from our industries, from CPG, food and bev, comms, beauty, have moved from where we used to live and are here now. So we actually have a really nice industry hub of people out here in Connecticut. So if anyone's based near and around Westport, hit me up.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I like to start every episode with a little bit about the company or the brand that you work for. So tell us a little bit about Jennifer Bett Communications, what you all do and what you stand for.
Thank you. Yes. So I'm going to give my mouth a break and call ourselves JBC because we really do go by JBC most commonly.
Okay.
So we are an almost 10-year-old media relations agency. I joined Jen, who's our founder and my business partner, 10 years ago because for two reasons. One was there's an amazing influx of brands who were launching that were changing the status quo, whether it was value driven, it was direct to consumer, or the product that they're bringing something to the market that was a higher quality at a better price, whatever it was. There was such an influx of innovation. And what we realized really early on is they didn't know where to go for PR. And it was either they had to go to a consumer agency who only did consumer media, or kind of a business and trade and tech agency. But for us, we're like, but that's not servicing the whole brand if you only do one part of it. And we really wanted to work with brands, that were value driven, that were true innovators, but also that we could service holistically. So how do we talk to their consumer and continuously engage them and acquire new consumers with the press that we do, while also supporting the business? So what are the right business stories? What are the right conferences, speaking engagements, op-eds, and really be a true partner when it comes to driving real growth and scale. And you really can do that as PR, with PR as a vehicle. If it's done well, and it's done consistently, and it's hitting the right messages, the right targets, the right audience, you can see how it affects your business, not just from the press that you've immediately gotten, whether it's an influx in traffic or conversion, but also all the other external things you do. So how much easier is it to fundraise? And a lot of that has to do with great press. How much easier is it to work with other brands because they see all the press and they see the buzziness and the opportunity for a partnership? Influencers, all of a sudden you're seeing an influx of inbounds and of interest. So we really see what we do as a scalable investment in your brand if it's done the right way. So, and we've been doing that and that same kind of thesis around PR for the past 10 years, and have had the honor of working with so many amazing, fast growing brands across CPG, food and bev, but also beauty, health and wellness, fashion, women's health, kind of you name it. We are industry agnostic, and it allows us to really have our hands in so many different areas of the world, basically, that affect the consumer on a day-to-day basis.
Now, can you speak to a little bit why JBC has decided to focus in these areas? I mean, you gave it a little bit, but I think that there's a little personal going on in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the benefit of, having your own agency with a partner whose values align with yours. I think she and I we're publicists at heart, but I think we're also have a little bit of an activist in us. And when we think about what we do, we know what we do is valuable and we're really good at it. And we want to work with brands that are bringing good to the world in whatever they're doing, whether it's better products, cleaner products, safer products. Like working with a brand like Styx, for example, that is existing in a post Roe v. Wade world, but trying to change the stigma around emergency contraception and making sure women and men know that you should just have this. If you have condoms in your drawer, you should also have emergency contraceptive in your drawer. So we love this, like, brands that are changing conversations, that are pushing status quos. And yes, and when we go to bed at night, we feel really good because telling those stories of these founders and the brands and the products that they're creating, we know we are, in a small way, doing something good for the world at large. And I can say that about almost our entire roster, that there's some major value and major mission that they are using their brand as conduits for. Like Grove Collaborative, as you mentioned, they're trying to eliminate plastic and really fighting this fight and at a larger scale, and using their brand to show that you can replace all of these conventional products in your home using cleaner, safer alternatives that also remove plastic from the environment, which is obviously one of the bigger problems we're facing. So, it's kind of across the board. Or if it's like fashion, we have brands that are sustainable or circular. Like, we're really just trying to make sure that we're identifying those opportunities to do good with what we do.
I love that. And I'm thinking about Grove Collaborative because they've been on my radar for a few years. I was at Target this last weekend and they're in Target now. And I had not been following them that closely to see that the retail channel, that they've moved into the retail channel, which I think is fabulous. So not relying just on that DTC kind of subscription model, but now moving into an environment where they're getting net new eyes is so great. Thank you. And then your focus is the passion behind it, right? When you're going into business because you feel like you can make an impact, it so changes the day to day, doesn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean,
Mhm.
we spend all of our time working. If you think about it, it's 40 hours a week that we're not with our
Mhm.
families or partners or whomever is important to you in your life, even your
Mhm.
dog, spending time with your dog, all these other things
Yeah.
you don't have time with because you're working.
Mhm.
And for us, we want to make sure that work is meaningful, it's valuable, it's worthy of that sacrifice of
Mhm.
time. It's also why we've been so particular on the kinds of brands that we sign, because it's not just Jen and myself, it's our whole
Right.
team of almost 50
Mm.
people. We want them to feel just as satisfied and passionate and feeling good about the work they're doing, because just as much as Jen and I are away from our families working, so are they. So,
Yep.
and I think if you talk to my team, I think the sense of feeling like they're really contributing and not just working in a bubble or working just to work. It also
Mhm.
impacts the quality of work and the results that come out of all of that. And I think that
Mhm.
also resonates with our brands as we talk
Mhm.
to them, because
Mhm.
you want your PR team and your media relations partner to be as excited about what you do as you
Yes.
are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, those of us who have had an eye on the PR world, and maybe even not, have seen JBC's brand partners getting some real traction. Brands like I mentioned, Grove Collaborative. There's also Parachute, the Skim, Sticks, the Honey Pot, and so many others. Tell me, or tell us, I should say, what does your firm look for in a brand partnership, and how would you describe those relationships?
Yeah, I think we are pretty founder forward. So, like many VCs, the way we're thinking about
Mhm.
it is the
Mhm.
founder story and what and why this brand even exists, and whether they want to be forward facing in media or not. We really are first getting excited and kind of romanticized by that story. So, do we connect just with that founder and that story, and why the branding even exists? But then it's the brand. Is the product amazing? Is the brand itself, can it stand on its own too? Because again, not every founder wants to be forward facing. So does the brand have enough of its own stuff to exist on its own?
Mm.
Um, and then the last thing is very personal and not like a business plan answer, but it is, do we just viscerally react to it in a positive way?
Yeah.
Do we want to own it, eat it, wear it, gift it, live in it, whatever it is?
Mhm.
Um, because again, that like last piece is the passion and the natural connection to our brands. And again, we can say
Sure.
that confidently, our entire roster, we all feel connected to in some way.
Mhm.
So, or we know people who are already using it before we even talk to them. So
Mhm.
that's kind
Mm.
of what we're looking for. And then of course we're thinking in the back of our minds, what are the possibilities on the storytelling front? Can we mine enough
Yep.
from this brand, even if they have no news for a year? Like
Mhm.
that's kind of our litmus test, is if they told us they had nothing new to say between now and the end of the year or in a year, do we feel the brand in and of itself, the way they operate, the way they exist, how they're creating, is that enough for us to mine and pick apart narratives that we can just use the brand as the news? And that's
Yeah.
really how we think about how we sign. And then it's just for
Mhm.
us, it's more like icing on the cake if they have a new product coming out or a partnership or a store opening or whatever. To us, that's not the must have, which is opposite of a lot of approaches. It really, for
Mhm.
us, is just kind of a bonus.
Mhm. That makes sense. I I love when you talk about just the visceral component of it. I think a lot of PR firms don't have the luxury of making those
Very true.
changes. Luxury, and then some of that is because of they need the work, and then other times the leadership doesn't think about business that way, and I think it would be great if more businesses, regardless of size, could have that element about them where they could choose, because either we call it a culture fit, whereas we have like
Sure.
put it on. Do we Would we go out and have a beverage with that person? Would we
Right.
hang out with them? Is part of it. And then also, I mean, we get fascinated with we can find love of any product, quite frankly. I don't think I've ever had somebody show me something and I've been like, that's interesting. So it's usually for me more a little bit more of a culture fit.
Hmm.
Um, so I like that you have that as part of your decision making. That's a conscious choice that you're making. It's not just something that you haphazardly are thinking about. That is literally a choice that um, you use as part of your relationship I don't know, relationship toolkit. I'm not
Sure.
sure what to put.
Yeah, I think we just
Yeah.
I mean, Jen and I have both been doing PR for a long time. We've worked at a lot of places. We've been in-house, we've been in agencies, so we've kind of seen it all. And
Yeah.
doing this together, we realized it's the freedom of choice is ours.
Yep.
So let's make good choices, right?
Yep.
And not just for
Mhm.
us and
Mhm.
for each other, but also our agency and the people who work
Mhm.
for us. It's
Mhm.
and that's a big responsibility, and we don't take that
Mhm.
lightly,
Yep.
And I think we kind of, again, like the values that we really operate in are in doing everything intentionally
Yep.
with the whole as kind of the objective, not just her
Yeah.
or myself
Right.
individually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to switch to one of the topics that you and I had when we were preparing for this podcast. And this is around using celebrities to as a brand endorsement in some way. And we talked about kind of what are the myths and tricks of leveraging
Mhm.
celebrity brands. And this is a huge topic of interest for many of the brands that we work with and that we talk to. And so I'm assuming it is for everybody because it's fun. But let's first talk about those myths of celebrity endorsements. How can they how what do we believe? What do you believe the market thinks about using a celebrity to endorse a product that's really fundamentally untrue?
What's fundamentally untrue is thinking that working with celebrities is a home run, no matter what. So
Mhm.
that is the myth. And I think
Mhm.
working with celebrities can be really powerful for brands. It depends on how you partner with that celebrity,
Mhm.
what their role is with your brand, and the authenticity and the authentic connection that celebrity has with
Mhm.
the brand. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, so that kind of again, just to reiterate, that overarching myth that you work with a celebrity, your brand is automatically going to succeed is very false. It has
Mhm.
to be done with a lot of intention and a lot of thought.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it can also be in a lot of different ways and still be successful. So
Oh, for sure. Mhm.
there's not one tried and true strategy in working with celebrities that will
Yeah.
work across the
Mhm.
board. So
Yeah.
you can leverage celebrity simply by doing seeding with celebrities with a celebrity
Mhm.
seeding agency. And there's some that do really amazing work. They are also
Mhm.
intentional in how they seed that product and who it goes to, and does
Mhm.
that make the right sense? And you can really leverage that, just like
Mhm.
authentic and that seeding opportunity for press
Mhm.
coverage and on your Instagram, whatever it is. And that's super valuable, and that works for brands. Depends on the category, depends on the kind of product,
Yep.
whatever. But that simple, kind of very straightforward
Mhm.
approach also works. You can also now in the past, I mean, 5 or so years, there's been the influx of celebrities diversifying their
Yeah.
portfolios and
Yeah.
being very smart and realizing that
Mhm.
maybe they can't rely solely on if they were an athlete or if they're an actor. There's
Right.
one day one of these things aren't going to exist. So they either have started founding their own brands and or now they're investing in brands. And there's some
Yes.
celebrities who invest and want to be very forward facing and like are very much like, I'm willing to shout from the rooftop that I've invested in this
Mhm.
brand. And that is
Mhm.
when you're really lucky. um,
Yeah.
and to be able to leverage that name, because again, that's why it's important to make sure there's a real connection, because now the moment you announce that, you're always going to be
Yeah.
associated with that celebrity and they're going to show up in
Yes.
almost all your press. So be sure it's the right person if you're going to leverage it externally.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then obviously there's some that invest that don't want to be a part of conversations. That's also fine too, because
Yeah.
they invested, and that's sometimes more important than being able to use it externally. There
Mhm.
are also some brands that even get more integrated with celebrities, where they come on as like chief something officers,
Chief
whether
creative
it's
officer. We saw that with
sure.
the Jonas Brothers or something like that.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
those again can be really, really powerful. Again, if the
Mhm.
execution feels authentic, and more importantly, when they're in that kind of a role that feels much bigger with the brand, you have to make sure you have access. So
Yeah.
you may be able to use them with the initial announcement, and that's going to give you a nice halo effect. And again, they'll always be associated with the brand. But how do you have access to them beyond that announcement? Do you
Right.
get
Mhm.
one interview a quarter that you can leverage them
Yeah.
for? Or are they going to do like an event with you once a
Yeah.
year? You want to make
Mhm.
sure when you're getting into bed with celebrities or anyone with a large following and influence that you've thought all of this through, not just the initial moment, but
Yeah.
what is the longevity here?
Right.
And we've had the pleasure of being able to kind of work with every iteration of this and see what works and what doesn't. And I think, again, if you know what you're looking to get out of that relationship and it's a mutual partnership, it really does have a hugely positive impact on brands.
Mhm. So I'm going to ask a question. This was not prepared because I have had the following. We've worked with a number of brands. There are some brands that are kind of bootstrapping it, and we work with those, and then we always work, between them and up to Fortune 50. But on the smaller side, I see them sometimes going, I've got all of these athletes from different colleges. They want to participate in this product because it's very cool, and then there might be 3 or 4 of them. And one of the things that we've typically shared with those young brands is to be really careful that those celebrities don't crash into each other with conflicts,
Mm-hmm.
what their expectations are about even just piece of the pie of the brand,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that they have a lawyer involved, that all of that is cleaned up. Always seems really exciting, but that kind of
Right.
what happens on day 2 is sometimes far away, and that's what you're saying is the intentionality and the planning are pretty critical.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thinking forward. And I think it's when you're a nascent brand, I think that is
Mhm.
a point where it's too early, unless someone with that influence is coming on in a co-founder role and they're
Right.
much more invested than just wanting to put their name to it. It's very
Yeah.
early. And a lot of our brands, when they come to us when they're, a early stage, are like, should we do
Mhm.
even a design collaboration or brand collaboration, forget a
Yeah.
celebrity, just any
Yep.
kind of collaboration with
Yeah.
another brand,
Yeah.
we actually advise them against it because we're like, you haven't even established yet who you are
Mhm.
externally, and the consumer and the media are just getting to know you. So to bring
Right.
in another brand or partner at this stage doesn't make a ton of sense right now until you can define who you are, because will always be associated with that
Yep.
partnership.
With that.
So it's the
Yeah.
same as having the example you're giving is sometimes it is too early to bring in other
Mhm.
folks that are going
Mhm.
to externally
Mhm.
somehow impact your brand.
Mhm. Is it possible to work with a celebrity and have a long-term ROI association with them past their participation? And I'm looking at, of course, companies like Nike, very sophisticated. They get how to use celebrity endorsements. I'm talking about those mid to small brands that are kind of excited about this opportunity. And they're wondering, okay, well, if I'm with these folks for a year or two, is there a halo effect long term, or is there not? What's that expectation? Or what are the tricks to extend that out? That's 2 ways of looking at that. Hey?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, when there's press out with you and a celebrity, they're always going to be attached to you. So
Mhm.
whoever writes about you can choose to include them in a headline or not for
Gotcha.
infinity,
Okay.
basically, right until the end of
Okay.
time. There's no
Okay.
limitation on you can't control if an outlet writes about that relationship, which
Mhm.
is useful for you, especially
Yeah.
if it was a successful relationship. You being able to proactively leverage that partnership really only depends on the usage terms and how you've negotiated that. Are you allowed to continue posting about them in association with your brand
Right.
past that 1 year,
Mhm.
whatever, and sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't.
Mhm.
And if
Right,
you
right.
cannot, you're really relying on the fact that it's already out there to be valuable long term.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I can understand that. We understand that sometimes we forget, I think, when we're working in marketing, and because there's so many brand marketers that come from multinationals into
Hmm.
small, mid-sized brands, and I think, uh sometimes they forget about the power of the brand and the organization that just came into, and when they come into the smaller firm. But when you're working with anybody who is providing either their services
Hmm.
or advice or their image, you have to get their permission. So you have to think about the longevity and the commitment of all of that up front.
Exactly. And I mean, listen, I think again, once something's out in the world, you can't you can't erase it, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
while you as the brand may not be able to post images of that celebrity past a certain amount of
Right.
time, that doesn't mean that you can't pitch it. Like your agency can't mention the
Right.
fact, we have
Mm-hmm.
one brand that uses a strategy of leveraging like big influencers
Mm-hmm.
as creative directors on a yearly basis, or maybe every 18 months they cycle them out, and that's their strategy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very much a like big part of their narrative. So when we're
Mm-hmm.
pitching these stories around their strategy, we can say in the past they've worked with all of these
Mm-hmm.
different people that
Mm-hmm.
that really kind of provides that kind of sense of authority in this approach. There's nothing wrong. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot do that. That's all fine.
Right.
But they
Mm-hmm.
may, as a brand, likely cannot continue leveraging assets from those
Yep.
earlier partnerships. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the difference.
Yeah, I get that. So it's so interesting because I'm talking about, moving around and trying to remember from, one organization to the other that things still sort of work the same. And I want to actually step back in time a little bit here. Now we've been talking about celebrities for a moment, but I want to talk about your journey into JVC and into this world. Um, you were the first guest I've had on this podcast that has been on a very specific career path since the beginning, which is crazy because I think I'm near 250 guests at this point. It's pretty great that you have a the most linear path, is what I'm going to say. Talk about what attracted you to the PR industry and what has you stay.
Um, that is a great question.
Mhm.
How I ended up in PR is kind of funny because I went to Fordham University in the city, and because for as long as I can remember, I wanted to work in fashion,
Oh.
and so I wanted to go into the city. I realized I didn't like NYU. I didn't like the way there was no campus, and I came from
Oh.
a small private school in Connecticut that like was kind of like Harry Potter, and like had this like vibe
Oh.
of like a campus. So I was like, okay, NYU is not for me, but I
Yep.
want to stay in I want to go and be near the city. So I visited Fordham and kind of fell in love with the campus, but then the curriculum, its vicinity to the city, the fact that we had Lincoln Center
Mhm.
as a campus as well, and like a fabulous van like that would take us back and forth from the main campus
Gosh,
to Lincoln Center.
so
I'm
cool.
like, this is the best of both worlds. So I went, and in my junior year, I was looking for internships in fashion, of course, and for whatever reason, ended up with two offers in front of me. One was to go into editorial, and they were at
Mm.
bridal magazines that don't even exist anymore, like Bridal Guide or something. I don't remember.
Wow.
And then the other one was at a small boutique PR agency.
Oh.
And I really loved the team there. And I loved the brands they worked with. They were like the Fry Company, and they did all these cool events. And so I was really torn. And honestly, as like a 19-year-old or however old I was, I chose PR because they were also paying like a stipend. So
Yeah.
I was like, well, I liked the energy there. I like the people there. I think it's cool. And also there's like the bonus of, having money.
Pay.
So
Yeah.
that's how I ended up in PR. So funny, but it ended up being fate because I took to it really quickly. I absolutely, like in the first week, I was like, this is amazing. I love this. I want to do this for the rest of my life. And it was really because I'm a super fast paced person, and really like that
Mhm.
you can working with different brands who have different stories to tell and different objectives and are bringing something different to the world. Like I loved
Mhm.
that kind of like pace and having to quickly move from one thing to another and switching gears.
Mhm.
Like to me, it felt like the best challenge ever. And I loved it. And that agency hired me right out of college. And the four publicists that I worked for there are my closest friends now.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
19 years later, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was the best. And I went from there to HL Group, which is a really amazing PR agency in New York City. And that's where I really got to see the breadth and scope of what we could do as media relations partners.
Mhm.
And that's where I worked with Tom's. And I worked with big brands like David Yurman, and kind of really
Mhm.
it was like PR boot camp because I worked with small, tiny brands, huge global
Yeah.
brands with lots of budget,
Mhm.
like all of these things,
Mhm.
and had a blast. And went to a company called Starworks Group because a client of mine went there. Was like, you should come here. You would love it. They do amazing work, and the head of the division is awesome, and you would really like just thrive here. So, and that was Jen. And that's where we met, at this agency. They no longer exist, unfortunately. But the funny story we always say is we met there. We were like really like vibing, and then like a month later, she goes, "Sorry, I'm leaving. I got a really amazing opportunity in house at a fashion brand." So, which everything happens for a reason. We both firmly believe that. So I ended up staying in Startworks Group for a while, had a great experience. I went in house to a few brands, and then Jen and I kind of just like orbited around each other for the next couple of years. And it's so funny. We both got to a point where we were getting a little bit bored with what we were doing and didn't feel like PR was being done the way it should be, based on how brands were evolving and how the consumer was evolving. And she started her consultancy, Jennifer Bett Communications, and was doing her thing. I was leaving my in-house role at a fashion brand to consult, and I started working with small brands, because what I realized is I wanted brands that were bringing mission into their brand.
Yeah.
They're providing gorgeous product, whatever it is. The founders were engaging. They're making me wake up every morning being really excited about their mission and being a part of that journey. And I think that, and I always say and credit that to my work with Tom's, is that was really the first time and my first exposure to that kind of three-tiered feeling of the founder stories, incredibly compelling. The brand and the product is compelling. And I also just feel viscerally excited about it. So we both started doing our kind of working independently. And then she called me one day and was like, I have a project I need to work. I just signed, and we've always wanted to work together. Like, let's do some stuff together.
Let's do this.
It kind of just evolved from there. It was really, again, it was, everything happens for a reason, and it was meant to be when it was meant to be. And that was 10 years ago. So I think some days we still look at ourselves and we're like, God, we did not ever imagine having a 50-person agency or 45 people. I try not to count. And we always thought maybe it would just be the two of us forever, but it kind of grew, and we're really proud of what we've done and the brands that we get to work with. And most importantly, everyone's like, what are you most proud of? I'm like, it's the team. 1,000%. I mean, I can confidently say we have the strongest team, the smartest publicists, the best writers, the best storytellers. And the fact that they chose us to work for is truly, it's very humbling.
That's so fantastic. And I think that's the reason why I get along with your team. I've met two or three so far of your 50. So if they are a representation of what your team is like, you have really amazing group of people working for you. Really smart, very compassionate, empathetic, great people.
Well, Jen and I always say, and I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but our number one,
gosh,
is we have a no asshole policy. That's client side and staff side. I think the team, they are so supportive of each other. They're collaborative. There's no sense of that like old school catty competitive. I mean, they're competitive in the sense that I think they're like, you got a Vogue story, amazing. Like, I want to go get one now, and like, or New York Times or whatever it is. So it's really, they are truly good, nice people, most importantly.
And I think the reason why I really connect with you and your team is when my business partner and I, we rebooted our firm in 2011. We were a generalist firm. And then in 2011, we decided we want to help the brands that are trying to make a difference in this world. And yet you can make money doing that. It doesn't have to always be about money. And I think there's kind of there's a vibe there. Thankfully, the business economy in general there's a big movement now, and so many people are doing it that it doesn't feel like a specialty anymore. Right. I mean, you still have your Enrons, whoever that might be of the world, but so many more businesses have gotten on board and said, "Oh, you know what? We don't have to be jerks about this. We can be contributing at the same time." And I want to say that it has to do with agencies like ours that are just promoting these works and making them turn into powerful brands out in the
Absolutely. And I
market.
think it's the media. And I think most importantly, it's
Totally.
the consumer. The consumer
Yeah,
wants something different than they did
they
10 years
do.
ago. They want something that feels good. They're
Absolutely.
more discerning. They're more educated at every tax bracket,
Yep.
So
Yep.
it comes always from the consumer first. And then the media being hungry for these
Mhm.
stories to tell makes everything else trickle down, right? Then it
Yeah.
allows
Yeah.
us the freedom to only
Yeah.
work with the brands that we feel like are doing good. It allows
Mhm.
founders who want to do good to do good. You know what I mean? So
Mhm. Totally.
it really kind of is circular in that sense.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you this, question about your journey and what sort of advice you'd give somebody on a German journey similar to yours, but really I think what I want to ask you, if I may, is what kind of advice do you find yourself giving clients? This might not be you, this might be your team, something that you hear your team now answering on a regular basis. Is there any kind of common theme running through the advice of your team right now?
Oh, gosh, the common theme is, well, it's two things. One is not being afraid to be vocal. No matter it could be, you don't we're not advocating for every single one of our brands to become huge activists or
Yeah.
advocates for
Right.
certain things, but what the things that are important to them and thus are likely important to their consumer, giving
Mhm.
them the confidence and the consult to do it, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that helps some of our brands. Obviously, the founders are way more naturally active in that way, and that's part of their DNA. And then there's some who
Mhm.
aren't quite there yet, but want to be. So,
Mhm.
giving them the confidence and the support system that allows them to do that when it makes sense
Mhm.
um, is one thing. I think that's probably the number one right now.
Yeah.
Um, on the founder level, though, like, because I'm really talking to a lot of founders all the time, and I think,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing, and it's mostly your female founders. It's the same thing around saying no, protecting themselves from not feeling obligated to do things they don't want to do. I think that's more on just
Mhm.
a human level, and it
Yeah.
not always connected directly to their business, what they're doing, but constantly having these conversations with each other to
Yeah.
remind ourselves that we have the power to say no to things and protect our time, protect our energy, protect our expertise. And that's kind of, I think that's been a, not even just recently, that's kind of been over the past several years. So those
Yeah.
would probably be the most common.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I love that. I'm glad that we can share that. So, tell me a little bit about what's next for you, for JBC. Should we be looking out for something in the next 6
Oh
months?
my goodness. So, um, one thing, and this is something that's always been important to us, is the idea of inclusion. And we've always kind of focused in that area and provided our partners with expertise and advice. But I think we're really doubling down on that as an external expertise too, because it's really important
Mm.
that as brands are wanting to scale and grow, ultimately that means reaching new audiences, right? Which if
Mhm.
you bring that down to another level, it's new and diverse audiences
Yes.
that your brand could speak to, but you're not speaking to
Mhm.
them because
Yes.
maybe social isn't quite there, or we're not sure. And it also, part of that comes down to us, is making sure our stories of our brands end up in the right places, reaching the most interesting, engaged, potentially engaged
Mhm.
audiences and thus diverse audiences. So we've been doing a lot of work internally to make sure that we are the best equipped at being great media relations partners and comms partners, always operating through a lens of DEI and inclusion. So our brands ultimately continue to grow, scale, reach new folks. And really taking it a step further and more formally advising our clients as a scoped out process and service to do that. So I think that's something we're really proud of and happy and excited to do. And I also think it's been really kind of a mission of mine to focus attention more on the comms industry and this career path for folks who are of color. I certainly didn't
Yes.
even throughout my career, I didn't see a ton of myself in a lot of places, but just took it upon myself to show up there. But now 10 years later, within JBC, feeling like I have a little more air and space to be able to make that a focus and show up more and mentor more, and hopefully kind of show this as a career path for all walks of life. But yeah, from us, there's other stuff like services and projects we're working on right now that we're really excited about that I actually can't talk about, unfortunately. But we have some cool brands that we are launching. We have new partners that are doing really interesting things that are currently under embargo, especially in the mental health space, mental fitness space. So I always say the best place to kind of keep track of us is our Instagram, because we keep that
fresh.
Keep that fresh daily. We have an amazing team who makes sure we're sharing all of our work, but I think we have some cool services, some cool partnerships that we're really pumped to kind of get out there and share with everyone.
Wonderful. Well, I have really enjoyed getting to know you even outside of this podcast, but prior to that, and excited for a drink at some point, frankly.
Oh, I love
it. Our time, I'll have to just come out to Connecticut, I think. Our time is almost up, I should say. And I have a question that I like to ask absolutely everybody. And it's this one. Are there any women leaders or rising stars out there, either in PR or CPG, fashion, that you would like to elevate for the work that they're doing right now?
Oh boy. Well, the people I'm going to mention don't need my help in elevating, because they're doing an amazing job, but I think it's important to keep highlighting this work. So Carly and Danielle, the founders of The Skim, the work they're doing around women in the workplace and paid family leave is just, it's just so important. And, we just are so proud to be working with them, and they're wonderful. And also women like Reshma Saujani and her Mom's First work. Again, so obviously a lot of this is very pointed and focused on women and parity and access. That's something that's just very important to us, right? Especially the time we live in right now. Shannon Watts from Moms Demand, gun violence and gun controllers are things that we're really passionate about too. So I can't not mention her. And my last one is Eve Rodsky from Fair Play Life. Again, also working around rebalancing the household workload and who does what in the home. So all of those women are people that I follow, I'm obsessed with. I probably overly fangirl them, but and again, they don't need me to help elevate what they're doing. They're already doing amazing things, but I think their work is not done, and for a lot of reasons. So that's why I want to continue to mention their names.
Thank you for sharing all of those. Fantastic. Wow. Okay. Well, we have been talking with Melissa Connor, partner and managing director of Jennifer Bett Communications, also known as JBC. Melissa, can you remind us where we can learn more about you and JBC?
Yes, of course. You can go to our website, www.jenniferbett.com, or Instagram, and that is @jbettcom. So JBETTCOMM.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And thank you so much for your time today, Melissa. I'm so
Thank
happy.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes. I love what you guys are doing, and I'm excited to just keep the comms going. And I also want to thank all of you listeners for your time today. Hey, if you like this episode, please share it with a friend. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you next time on the Gooder Podcast.
Produced by Heartcast Media.